we can get started. Welcome everybody to How Project Management Empowers Accessibility by Donna Bungard, who is our wonderful speaker here. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put them into either the chat or the QA. I will be monitoring both of those. And there you go. That's pretty much all I have to say. So I'll let Donna take it away.
Sounds great. Thanks, Marky. All right. So thank you so much for showing up. What we're talking about today is how management can basically bake accessibility into your processes and make it less painful, less scary, less overhead, just less dramatic, right? So first, who am I? I'm Donna. I have a whole bunch of initials after my name, basically saying I love people, I love accessibility, I love projects, and I love understanding how people interact with all of it at the same time. And it's just a lot of fun to keep learning like that. If you need anything, just always, I'm at dbungard on Twitter. You're welcome to reach out there. So what are we talking about, right? We're going to be talking about where we are, how to make a plan, what to look out for, how to talk to people, what to do if kind of the ship has already sailed, things that we want to do, and talking about our teams also. So let's just dive in. We are here. So I want to always start off, especially with certain rules, but in general, assuming positive intent. You're already here. People are already trying to put all of this into their projects, and they're trying to build it into their processes already. But it's just not always easy. But some people almost feel that clenching of, oh, I've got to put this, I've got more, I can't do more. So we're assuming positive intent. You're trying, you're already making a difference. But the challenge is that if you have an inaccessible site, you're talking just in the US and Canada alone, about a quarter of the people are basically being said, you're not important to me, go away, maybe don't come back tomorrow, as the quote from the movie Wizard of Oz here. What can I say? I'm a fool for a theme. But you're telling people that they're important, not important. Their experience doesn't matter to you. They are not going to make a difference to you, or vice versa. And you're also saying that to search engines too. They're not going to be able to get as much, and it kind of bites you that way too. So we need to understand that there's a whirlwind here and how to balance it. How do we bake this in, simplify it, and make sure that as managers, it's not this, oh my gosh, there's a twister coming at me of accessibility problems and I can't juggle that too. So let's break this down. Let's make it easy. And because we're project managers, we're going to make a plan. So we're going to just build it again into the processes you're already doing. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We don't want to make this hard. We don't want to add more work. So the first step in any aspect, especially if you do follow an agile methodology, is that definition of done. What does done look like? What does success look like? If you just have accessibility as part of your standard definition of done, at the organizational level, at the team level, at whatever level you're able to influence, if you can have that definition of done include accessibility, then you're already going to be that much further ahead. But the question is sometimes how? How do I do that? How do I make sure that's already there? I can say it, I can talk about it, but it doesn't mean it's actually going to happen. So we're going to talk about asking questions, building in some extra allowances into your estimates, and taking those extra allowances in your estimates in timeline and forecast them out and make some adjustments along the way. So first is that questions. And a lot of it's just you're in your discovery or you're in your design or development process. And it's just sometimes asking questions. Our persona is inclusive. Reality check. People are disabled on the web, or people who would self-identify as disabled are already on the web. They're already interacting with our websites. They're already doing all of this. So why aren't they represented in our personas? We're using all this demographic, psychographic, beautiful information to create these fantastic personas. Bake it in there. And that way, later on, when you're referencing back to your user stories, you're already accounting for some of the challenges that your users may or likely are already dealing with or already overcoming. And then determine if there's maybe part of the demographic audience that might benefit from a AAA consideration. By most legal standards, AAA is certainly not required, but it doesn't mean that if your target audience is much more likely to, I worked on a website once that was geared towards individuals who were severely either blind or had severe vision impairments. And that site spent a little extra energy making sure that for everything visual or that would rely on a screen reader, those considerations were at the AAA level. The whole site may or may not have been, but those considerations absolutely were. When it comes to design, looking at brand colors is a big thing. A lot of organizations, their design department come up with these great brand colors in these schemes, and inevitably there's a light gray or a medium to light yellow or something like this, and something that's just not going to pass the contrast. And as you heard Carrie talking about just before this one, no pressure following her. As you heard Carrie talking just before this, if you didn't catch the recording, color contrast is every site. Same. I haven't looked at as many sites as Carrie has, to be honest here, but every site I've looked at too. Color contrast is the biggest issue. So if you start with the brand colors and analyze them to begin with, you're going to have a much stronger presence moving forward. And then you can also look at that design phase right at the at the wireframe stage. Is there enough line spacing accounted for? Are the target sizes big enough? Are there just general structural issues being addressed right at wireframes? Because again, if you make it part of the process, then by the time our development teams get to it, a lot of the work's already been done. But then with the development team, you always ask about third parties. Are we embedding something that might not be accessible? Was there time allotted in the original SOW for QA to do accessibility testing? And if not, what automated tests can be built in? It's not going to catch everything by any means, but it might throw a red flag where it might get missed otherwise. And I mentioned our personas. I love the idea of just part of the normal process of creating a persona is going to be understanding that our users are already people who identify as being disabled. And the disabilitystatistics.org is a great tool. It does work on CDC data. That has its limitations. It's binary genders. Its age ranges are pretty vast. Their race identification is limited. In terms of inclusivity, it can present a challenge, and I will acknowledge the weakness of that. But I think at this point, when we're looking for that type of solid data to lean in on, having a resource to give us something, to give us an idea, that launching point is really, really powerful. So we can just go ahead and we can build this into that process early. I mentioned the brand colors. Now there's a ton of fantastic color contrast tools out there. There's one by WebAIM that's amazing. However, that does one at a time. If you do get handed a color palette, this is a fantastic tool because you enter them in over here on the left, and it will give you all the combinations that, do not pass. This passes if it's only over 18 point. This is okay for the AAA level. It's going to tell you really off the bat, what combinations of these colors can I use, and what ones maybe do I need to keep for an accent or something like this. So it's a great tool for your XT teams. So estimations. The way I see it is this. As project managers, we're already trying to put in time for the risk. We're already trying to account for the unknown. Even the most amazing teams in the world, there's always that level of unknown, and we're always going to have to account for it. Estimating what it might take to make X, Y, or Z accessible is just another risk factor. You can talk it over with your teams. You can learn about their comfort level or their educational level in that particular area. We can go ahead and get some data as your team starts building things and doing things and understanding, okay, we wanted to do X, Y, and Z. Well, that mega menu wasn't inherently screen reader friendly. I'm just saying an example off the top of my head. You can account for the fact that, okay, it took us X much more time this time around, and build that into your estimate next time. So just like anything else new or newer to your team, go back and forth, manage the risk, and just build it in. And if you're building it in there, it's not scope creep later. It's not any of that. It's just part of the process that you're already doing. And then once you have those estimates that work with that, you can adjust your forecasting and your road mapping right from the beginning. Again, the idea is to keep things transparent, keep it genuine, and by building it into the process, there's no creep, there's no surprises, there's no, oh my gosh, it's going to be X, Y, and Z. You're building it in right from the beginning. So part of that building it in and making it normal is to not add extra milestones. I don't know the last time I heard of a website that says, oh, I made it responsive as a milestone. It's just what we do. We don't talk about it anymore except in testing. We assume we need the mobile experience. We assume it needs to be responsive. Same with accessibility. I've said for years, once we get this down and once this is awesome in the norm, we don't have to talk about it anymore, or at least not much. I mean, who sits around and does sessions on responsive design? There may be niches in there, but it's not an educational thing we do anymore because everybody has to do it. It's the same idea. Don't add extra milestones. Just like with the personas, don't make the disabled persona. There's not that uniqueness to it. It's part of the user journey that's already happening, whether or not we're acknowledging it. So we need, it's time to show the whole community of individuals out there that we respect them enough, and we hear them and recognize them enough that their user journey is important to us too. And we don't need to throw up a flag and say this is amazing and this is a milestone. We just need to build it into our already existing processes. And moment to recaffeinate. So watch out for flying monkeys. Again, there is always a risk. There are always areas that are going to be more challenging than others. And understanding that potential pitfall is something, again, you're doing anyway. You're always looking for those flying monkeys in any project. So common areas that we might want to take a look at would be that navigation. Is that going to work really well for keyboard-only users? Also think of it as keyboard-only users at 200% zoom. That sometimes is a huge differentiator than just saying, oh, keyboard-only, it works. Does it, though? Form labels, ARIA, alerts, focus. There's just so many areas. Take the time. Our bad ARIA can really, really get confusing. So take the time to either find an alternative way, or if you're using ARIA, take the time to make sure and estimate the time to make sure that you're testing it, that it works right, that it makes sense. Headings, they are not legally required, but really, if you want people to know where they are, like I say headings are like going into a subway and everything just says stop, and there's no real understanding of where you are in the chain. When you mess around with your headings, so match order with styles that make sense, but also make it so that way things are not styled to look like headings, and things that are headings aren't chosen as an H2 because they're that size. They're chosen as an H2 because that's where it is in the structure. Alt tags, we're saying girl walking on road is very different than Dorothy in her ruby red slippers road walking down the yellow brick road. It's a very distinct picture in your head. So make them meaningful. That skip to main content, make sure it's visible. Is something to keep in mind, and I know I'm going to say it again later, is that not all screen reader users are visually impaired. So make sure you have that skip to main content in there. Keep in mind that things like carousels are never inherently accessible. When you're wireframing, captions are a great time to start talking about them in the wireframes. Do you have complex charts or graphs or anything that really needs a caption? And is there a plan for them? Is there a size of font? Is there an expandable area? Is there room on the page? How is that going to work responsibly or at a 200% zoom? Things like that. And then, of course, the contrast itself. So those are some really key areas to keep aware of. Obviously, there's a much longer list overall, but those ones are great. Yeah, accessibility is not only for visual impairments. I hear a lot of people get very focused on that. And the truth of the matter is there's a wide variety of challenges individuals are overcoming daily. Mobility, cognitive, audio. There's a lot of different perceptions and ways people are interacting with the web, and you need to account for more than just one. Any testing is better than no testing. I am not a native screen reader user. Anyone who's ever seen me do a demo and yell at my screen reader back, my screen reader's voice name is Tom. Tom and I have discussions. I usually don't win. I'm not a native user, but going through a site, I can tell if I can't open something or if a bunch of links are skipped. I'm not saying I'm better than a native user. I don't compare. But if you can't get a native user on a site, at least get somebody who can go through the site and look for those pitfalls. Anything is better than nothing. And then inclusion, it just matters. So especially on media heavy sites, but overall, inclusion matters. Individuals need to be represented throughout the entire process. And it's respectful inclusion, not tokenism. I just always feel the need to say that. So overlays are not inherently accessible. And it comes down to, I one time was talking to a client, and after a lot of back and forth, I said, you realize that your users already have, that you're not the first website they're going to. They're already using screen readers. They're already using different contrast settings. They're already using Zoom. They're already using tools. And you're short-circuiting their tools by having like this hero complex of, oh, I need to put this overlay on so I can save you. No, nobody needs you to save them. There's no shortcuts. That's a daydream. That's a bad idea. You need to respect your users. You have to respect the fact that these are competent individuals who are using your site, who happen to have a challenge, and they've got tools. They've got tools they're using. You just need to be respectful enough for your site to be usable by all of the people. And then as PMs, here's the hardest part: advocating for patients. Sometimes things are going to take longer. It's inevitable. And sometimes we have us and our teams, we're under a lot of pressure to turn something around like that. That does not always go well. Rushing QA is never a good idea. It happens. We've all been under the gun, but it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be one of our biggest priorities to advocate for the patients to do it right. Now, I'm not saying you're never going to end up having to test something after you've pushed it live to see if really it was keyboard accessible. I'm hoping you don't have to, but I don't necessarily pretend that that's really going to be a worldwide solution right away. But if we advocate for it, if we build it into the process, if we build it into the roadmaps, into the forecasting, into the time allotted, if we're giving everyone ample time to do their jobs well, we have fantastic teams, people. That, looking around the Drupal community, all right, so maybe I'm, not looking at most of you right now, but looking around the Drupal community, there is so much incredible talent. We need to give you guys time to do it. How to talk to stakeholders. Caffeinated? All right, now we can talk to stakeholders. Again, we're back to assuming positive intent. It's really, really easy when somebody is in a stressful situation or environment to be like, oh, they just don't care. They care. They're juggling too. Stakeholders have a whole bunch of needs outside of their interactions with us. And trying to be empathetic and keeping that compassionate view in mind is going to be one of your most powerful tools when talking to stakeholders, because they're worried about budget. Okay, we need to give your team longer to do that. What is this doing to my bottom line? What about the deadline? I promised the C-suite we'd have this done by X date. Does this really impact my users? I've heard that question many times. The answer is yes, but they need to understand why. And then they're also wanting to give options for their staff to do things to save time or budget, or just empower their team to do whatever they need to get done, to get their job done, right? So they're juggling all of these things, and they have all these people they're reporting to and having to show metrics and budgets and timelines. And what we need to do is help translate the value of doing it well the first time. It's about being practical. Hey, yeah, there's all of these benefits. Let me show you. Let me make you feel strong in your choices. Let me empower you with practical numbers, practical approach. Everybody, not everybody, a lot of people want to stand up and, I used to be the queen of this, but it's just the right thing to do. That's great. But unfortunately, if somebody is stressed out that they need to report upstream, as much as they may believe that right along with you, showing them the numbers and how it's going to be better, how now Google search, the latest algorithms, some of the accessibility things are the same as some of the new algorithm things. That they didn't do it for accessibility, but some of those work. You're showing them value. And that's what they can communicate upstream and say, and by the way, we're doing what's right. And that makes it easier. You're empowering them by understanding their pain points, just like you would if you were talking about any other aspect of the project. That said, sometimes we get projects where we kind of inherit them. And we inherit something that's going to need remediation. It's inevitable. So plan for it. Plan for the idea of getting the information and the data right from the start. Right in your onboarding process, we all do technical assessments, right? We all try to see what's under the hood. Make sure there's some high-level accessibility pieces in there. You don't have to go in through and take the deep dive, but start doing some high-level checks. What is this? Is this really a good idea kind of thing? Take a look at their personas. Are those personas inclusive? And if not, is this something you can bring up? Maybe it's not something you want to bring up in your introduction kickoff, but maybe it's something you can slowly build towards. Build it into other deliverables, build it into a conversation. Approach things gently. Review the backlog. Are there red flags? Are there things that keep showing up in the backlog that make you go, wait a second, we should probably check that? And then if if there's are some stakeholders who may not be fully aware of legal awareness, they don't necessarily understand the different, what is a standard versus what is the international standard versus what is, Bill C-81 in Canada, what is 508 in America, what is the EU stand if you're doing an international site. I was looking up some three different Asian countries the other day for what are their legal requirements. I read something, I'm like, wait a second, I don't even understand what those are. And I was researching it. Understanding where the users are and what the target market is and what the international standards are, it can get overwhelming to somebody who's not in this world. So helping just clarify and simplify. And I didn't want to go. So clicking our heels. Everything is changing. And the truth of the matter is all of this remediation, all of this planning, all of this, they're just kind of the first steps. It's just too big and vast. And in the end of the day, we need to hand this all off to our clients and empower them to keep going. The first thing I think is vitally important is content editor training. And, several people have heard me even recently be on a little soapbox about this, because we hand somebody a site without giving them context of how to keep it accessible. And then people get frustrated with them, or they get frustrated with themselves when they realize their post is accessible. But we didn't train them. That's just silly. So we're going to just help our stakeholders by empowering their teams, by training the content editors on how to keep the site accessible. It doesn't have to be a 2-day training course. It can be, an hour and a half session where you just talk things out. And it's so powerful to empower people that way. And work with the stakeholders to talk about an accessibility statement. It's the commitment of, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what we're aiming for compliance. This is how to contact us if you feel we've missed something. Whitehouse.gov has a very well written accessibility statement these days. Check it out. It's respectful, it's simple, it's to the point, and it gives somebody a way to contact them. Never just write one for somebody. Always have that. If you are the client, great. Talk to your legal team. If you're the agency or a vendor or a third party of any way, you can give a sample, but have them run it with their legal team. There is a legal aspect, and that should always be approved by their team, just like any privacy statement or terms of service. But with this, it's simple enough that you can kind of help get them in that right path. Perform scheduled checks. It's very common for us to just every few months start clicking through a site to see how it's working, make sure nothing's odd or unexpected for, maybe there's a team of 30 different volunteers entering information and you're just kind of clicking through. While you're doing that, just do some checks. You can make them scheduled checks with your team and make them deeper dives, or you can just do a few things yourself. And then empower your own team to be the leaders in this too. Don't feel as the PM you are the person talking about it and baking it in. You have your technical leads helping you. You have your strategists. You have your UXers. You've got this amazing team around you. So empower them with the resources that make it powerful to them. And when they have that ability to just take it and go, again, the baking it in, it all becomes easier. And it allows you to plan for it. And you're not balancing, you're not just trying to fit it in, you're not trying to just juggle all this stuff. It's just part of your plan now. And you have a team of experts who are building it into their plans too. So it's a heck of a lot easier. And finally, we want to talk about our teams. Here we are in a quasi post-COVID environment, I guess, or I guess you could still say we're COVID. I don't know what to say anymore. To be honest, we're still in this highly virtual existence, right? Things to key. Oh, shoot. I did it myself. The new things, I really need to apologize to everybody for not putting my captions on. Oh my gosh, it happens. Yeah, luckily there's a live transcription going on through this camp. So you hopefully have been able to follow along. Again, I apologize. Our darling teams too. And in this highly virtual space, we need to keep in mind what's going to help our teams perform their best as well. So turn on captions is the first one, and I am so embarrassed. I've been sitting here like agonizing over an audio setup and lighting and all of that, and I completely spaced this. It's the first easiest thing to do. Every system has something right now. Just do it. When you're in Slack, bold your links. Slack, for whatever reason, doesn't underline things inherently. It just changes color. We can't change that. But bold your links in Slack so it's a little easier for your team to check it out. And also leave space. I usually say it's primarily, in my experience, the introverts. But in general, you sometimes have these quiet, very deep thinkers, and they come up with the most beautiful, elegant solutions. And then we don't give them time to process, and we expect answers on the fly, and then we miss out later. Either leave space at the end of your calls and give that, or if you know that you're going to be diving into something that you want somebody to really have time to think about, give your team access to some of the information, your internal team access to the information ahead of time. And with that, they can better kind of start processing so they are more comfortable to be able to give that information back to you later. And with a couple of minutes left here, we have questions. Does anyone have any thoughts, questions, things they'd like to chat about? I'd love to hear.
I did not see any questions in the chats. So
Okay.
now is your time, people.
All right. Well, it doesn't look like we have a lot to say. Yeah, in that case, Mark, do you want me to stop sharing and you can tell people what's coming? Ooh.
Right. April just stated this makes me think about the values of a project, like being able to make decisions based on the value of accessibility.
Yeah. It really comes down to also the values of, you need to be able to include it in the sales process. You need in your planning process, in your discoveries, all of it. If you bake it in, it doesn't become a value anymore. Again, it's like responsive design. We don't talk about the value of responsive design. We just know it's there. I argue that when we are successful, we won't have to anymore. We won't have to be chatting about it. So there's that detail. But yeah, it's absolutely value.
Okay.
Awesome.
Hey, look, my mouse.
Ooh, coming up next.
One thing that April did state is she's thinking personal values, org values, project values, kind of like trickling them down, just like you said. So.
Awesome. Thank you, April.
All right. Thank you very much, Donna. That was very informative. I appreciate it. Coming up next for 15 minutes, we got the expo hall and networking. And then at 3 o'clock, we have some more sessions. Building mindset for technical leadership is in one room. Ideas to action, how to turn your passion into a Drupal community project is another room, which is a great contrib talk. And then rebuilding the college website during a pandemic, a journey of discovery. That's in the third room. I'd give you directions to the rooms, but literally it's a click on your thing there. Thank you again, everybody, for attending, and go forth and do good.
Bye, all.